Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Param Eftekhari. I'm one of the co-founders of the Institute for Critical Infrastructure Technology and the Center for Cyber Influence Operations Studies. And I'm excited to welcome you to today's book discussion on information warfare. The meme is the embryo of the narrative illusion, written by James Scott, who you'll be hearing from in a moment. I want to thank all of you for joining us here today. I have the privilege of working very closely with James as my business partner. I facilitated many discussions like the ones you'll be hearing today. I have sat in many briefings on this book for a number of different audiences, and of course I've had many late night discussions over adult beverages on this topic. And what's been really fortunate for me is I've been able to reflect on my own independent investigation of truth and really start to analyze why I am the person that I am and why I have the belief systems that I do. And through this process over the last several months, I've really come to understand that this book is, I think, covering one of the most important topics of our time. And I'm very happy for all of you that you've made the decision to be here today. And for those of you who are going to be watching this video at home, I'm excited for you because I truly believe that what this book represents and what ICIT is doing through CCIOS is addressing one of the all-time great topics that is not only impacting our generation, but generations to come, and that really is the fight to protect society's ability to think freely. And so, Mike, thank you as a fellow of CCIOS to putting this discussion together. For those of you who may not be familiar with ICIT, we do cover information warfare, cyber war, and at the core of what we do, obviously, is critical infrastructure, cybersecurity, and resiliency. One of the philosophies of ICIT is to liberate information, not commoditize it. So I encourage you to go to our website, icitech.org, go to our publications page. We have, I think at this point, 60 plus publications you can download for free. We don't even require an email address to access the information. We have, at this point, well over 100 videos on our YouTube page. We have a number of events that we do here in DC and around the country. On June 18th, we have our annual forum here in DC. That event does sell out. You can go to icitforum.org to register for that event as well. So with that, I'll ask Mike to formally introduce James Scott and to kick off today's book discussion. Mike?
Thank you, Param. So it's my honor and privilege to introduce my friend and colleague, James Scott. He is the author of 59 books. This is the most recent book, which Param already has mentioned. James is an advisor to the intelligence community. He's also an advisor to NATO, to the United Nations, to Five Eyes, and to select members of Congress and committees in Congress as well. He is well known both in the intelligence community and more broadly for his work, as Param already suggested, on cybersecurity and more recently on information warfare. So first of all, thank you. It's with pleasure that I get this opportunity to have this conversation with you. The way we're going to do this is a discussion. He and I will engage in a conversation, and then we're going to open it up to you all to broaden the conversation to talk about the different areas and issues that we bring up and other things that you might have questions on. So let me first ask you, James, there are various, at the geopolitical level, threats that we face and threat actors. Can you speak first at that level?
Yeah, sure. If we look at just Russia, you're looking at a certain perspective, certain techniques that are used. Russians have what's called maskirovka, which is the art of deception. And we're seeing that in the digital space. That is real, and they are an adversary that we have to take seriously. But we also need to take China seriously. We have to take the Muslim Brotherhood seriously with their cyber caliphate. That's very real. The special interest groups, domestically and abroad. The domestic special interest groups who don't know exactly where their funding is coming from, but they're using a color revolution model. If you're familiar with color revolution, that is the most potent ingredient in a coup d'etat. If you don't believe that, look for the color purple, see who's wearing it, what's the venue, what are they talking about, what's being announced. So it's important to look at the different reasons for influence operations, for the digitization of psychological warfare. It's the manipulation of cognitive biases. And everyone uses a different technique. So it's important, what I tried to do in the book is to break down how and I guess we'll talk about that, how they target, how the threat actors target. They have a different, Russians have a different propaganda style. They're using different vectors than the Chinese. Chinese are using different ones in Iran. And so we have this onslaught of attack right now on the psychological core of the population, so.
You mentioned Russia. It's obviously in the news, and everyone knows about some of the influence operations that they are running, or people should be aware of some of the influence operations they're running. We know that they attempted to at least gain information in terms of election security at the various state levels. There's no indication they actually had an effect on the election in terms of changing the numbers in any particular state or county or locality. So we have a picture of the Russians, but you also mentioned the Chinese, and I heard you speak a couple of days ago about the different ways the Chinese attempt to influence us here in the States, and it was pretty disturbing.
Yeah.
Can you kind of take us down that path and give us an overview?
Yeah. China is our most serious adversary. They are inflicting the most cyberkinetic psychological harm on the population. They have the PLA, they have the Chinese Communist Party, they have their 50-cent troll army that they use. And what they do have is something that none of the other actors have. And they have a serious presence physically within the US. Their business communities have a lot of involvement with the Tongs. These are business networking organizations, but there's direct Chinese Communist Party involvement. The university systems have the Chinese Student and Scholar Associations, directly funded, managed by the Chinese Communist Party. So if you have a research facility at your university, you've been compromised, because they will, it's a USB drive in the back of a computer. They're exfiltrating at will. Malicious payload, they get in, move laterally throughout the network, elevate privileges, and this is how it's done. Another thing that we see with them from an information warfare perspective is they will troll directly from the universities as far as comments, leave reviews, anti-American stuff, pro-China, strong China, dominant China. They create an illusion from within. So they're cyber-kinetically, psychologically attacking. And this is, so we're looking at just Russia. We need to look at the style that the Chinese are using, the style of propaganda, the style of trolling. And it's another thing to realize, why are they doing this? Why are these actors doing this? It's to inflict chaos within our democracy. Chaos is the op. That is the op. And they weaponize incidents. They'll take an incident and they'll fan the flame of both sides just to inflict chaos. They will go to a search engine, just type in crowds for hire, crowds for rent, and you create chaos by maybe having, if you're using the Color Revolution template, you have the core, who is the funding arm, you have the cohorts, who are the true believers, the actual worker bees that do the fundraising and the training, and then you have the citizen. The citizen, there's two types of citizens. There's the citizen that wants to be a believer, but then there's the hired actor. They are literally, and if you Google this, you will see exactly what I'm saying. And they have a bonus structure in place, and I see some people Googling it right now and they're shaking their heads. It's a booming industry right now. And what was that march? The March for Life or March for Our Lives? Okay, perfect example. You could not hire anybody from any of these firms that day. Everybody was working. All right.
And I think it's important to point out that it's not to say that there aren't people, as you said, who are true believers, who are citizens who are engaged because they have a particular perspective in trying to argue a particular point of view, and holding the flags and holding the symbols and all that kind of stuff.
So this was an example of a sincere incident that was weaponized by so many adversaries. I mean, cyber caliphate, the Chinese, Iran, North Korea now has cyberkinetic capabilities. and Russia, and special interest groups. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think you might have all seen in the news too that it's already been acknowledged by the mainstream media that Russian bots, as an example, were flaming the flames after the shooting down south.
Yes.
So it's not, it's not some kind of conspiracy theory, unless you can think the whole mainstream media is a conspiracy theory, which some of you might. And you also pointed out encouraging folks to Google, and I want to correct you.
Oh yeah, DuckDuckGo, don't use Google.
DuckDuckGo, don't use Google.
Don't use a dragnet surveillance capitalist who turned into a dragnet surveillance capitalist propagandist, and is now part of a censorship corporate nation-state collective. Yeah.
So we're going to unpack that shortly. And I think one way we're going to unpack that is actually talking about Cambridge Analytica. And I had a conversation once the news kind of broke about Cambridge Analytica with James, and he said two things that I thought were interesting that I'd like him to discuss with you all. He says, tip of the iceberg and old technology.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah. What we're experiencing now is psychographic targeting. So what you do is a nation state will exfiltrate metadata from a dragnet surveillance capitalist. GPS, Google, Facebook, just the tip of the iceberg. But what will happen is Cambridge Analytica, they were known for their psychographic targeting. So they've been working with elections and stuff all the time. They were only one component of this. They just did the psychographic targeting. They constructed the algorithms for this. But for it to work, it has to be multi-layer. You have to weaponize accounts. You have to weaponize Twitter accounts. You have to be able to generate a large volume of social media accounts across multiple vectors, even down to Tinder and match sites, just to get the digital footprint of the normalization of the abnormal idea, to make it seem, wow, everybody hates Trump, everybody hates Hillary. This stuff, you fan the flame and you make the impression so granular that it becomes normal. But Cambridge Analytica, they're probably the least sophisticated of the people. The reason they got involved was because the reason they got in trouble really because they were involved in all this blackmail and all that kind of stuff. But they're the least sophisticated within this space. So
I think it'd be of value to talk about some of the other players, how they actually collect and utilize this information, and how the architecture is created amongst multiple different players, and then shared with people who actually use this information for nefarious purposes.
So wait, what was that question?
So talk about some of the other players.
I'm dripping in microphones. I got like 3 here. One works.
Talk about.
What do we do with this, man? Yeah. Okay.
Talk about some of the other players who might not be so old school, using old technology, that we should be concerned about.
Well-funded special interest groups. That is definitely them and China are the enemy within. What is happening now is it's the weaponization of everything. The weaponization of fake news in between real news with an ideological variant slant to the right or to the left. It's journalists on TV using leading statements. They're psychologically steering you in a direction while simultaneously trying to act objective. This is not, this is not like some cabal in the media. That's silly. That's not looking at the bigger picture. This is corporations who are funded by large mega corporations, and they have an intention to sell more stuff, and you have everybody tapping their line. And the thing is, if you want a conservative narrative, you're going to watch Fox. If you want a progressive narrative, you're going to watch MSNBC. If you're completely crazy, you'll watch CNN. So it's interesting to see how agenda-driven CNN in particular is. They're not very objective, and it's not really news anymore. It's just negativity and toxicity. I used to watch it all the time. I just got sick of hearing about Trump all the time. I didn't even vote for Trump, but just I got sick of hearing about it,
One of the things that I think is intriguing and great about your book, Information Warfare, is that you've taken the concept of information warfare and moved beyond the conventional understanding of it. I would say you've moved into post-conventional understanding of it, driven down more deeply, and you talk about the meme. And the meme is kind of the driver of a lot of the things that you've already been talking about in terms of the mainstream media and the Muslim caliphate and the Russians and the Chinese.
Yeah.
Can you explain to us the meme?
The meme, the hacker side of me, I'm always looking for the vulnerability to inject a malicious exploit. So everyone's gunning for the meme, for the narrative. You can't get in anywhere. It's completely taken over. So this actually started out as a handbook for one of the agencies for meme warfare. And so I was thinking, what is the vulnerability for the narrative? How can a new actor get in there quick and start taking control? How to shape minds? And it hit me, the meme. The meme is the embryo of the narrative. The meme, control the meme, you control the idea structure. Control the idea structure, you control the belief system. You control the belief system, you control the narrative. Control the narrative, you control the population without firing a single bullet. Our foreign influence operations are not good at all. Our domestic influence operations are not good at all to soften the blow of a tragedy or to cultivate new legislation that is good for national security, this sort of thing. But again, it comes down to the meme, it comes down to color psychology, and within the meme, it comes down to the images. You want to manipulate the cognitive biases with the imagery, with the text. Fear and anger are the most easily stimulated, so you want to hit that nerve. Yeah.
So one of the things that I thought was really interesting is studying your work and looking at the meme is not just about spy versus spy, the Russians against the Americans or the Chinese against the Americans at the state level, or the cyber caliphate, ISIS radicalizing, recruiting people, or Al-Qaeda doing the same. You've actually taken these concepts and driven much deeper, and you look at our culture in total.
Yeah.
And how the memetics are being used to influence the public, not just for some of the things you've already mentioned, but for the totality of the life we live, the way we've normalized certain things that if you actually looked at it objectively, you'd be like, wow, I can't believe we actually think this is a legitimate way to treat one another, to live our lives, et cetera, et cetera. Talk about how you've taken the memetics as the idea, as the substructure of the idea, and started applying it to other areas besides geopolitics. Education, as an example.
Wait.
Well, because I've seen you both talk about and write about education, globally speaking, here in the United States. That is an indoctrination system for a particular way of thinking and acting in the world.
Yeah, it's interesting. Our education system is no longer about education. It's about institutional indoctrination. And this is a problem because the children are not learning anymore. We wonder why we have a problem with millennials. And this is why. And the teachers are no longer thought leaders. They're no longer subject matter experts. They are indoctrination programmers. And you look at how it works, and they are the authority figure in the room, dictating information that they are regurgitating from a textbook that they haven't even read. It's just a lesson plan. And this is a problem. And when you look at what's actually being done, and not just that, just in society in general, with the cultural Marxism that we're all held hostage to under the name of political correctness. We're fed ideas based on a psychoarchetype. And now, I mean, I may have said this before, but we're no longer a world that's ruled by lines in the sand laid by guys who won and lost wars 50 years ago. We're in a digital tribal chieftain society ruled by ideological variant silo. That's where we're at. And so, you know, I kind of tried to break this down in the book, but the idea and the psychological silos that we find ourselves in, it's hashtags, it's the YouTube channel that you watch, it's this stuff, and we're becoming more and more polarized, and the world's just, it's almost spinning out of its rocker. You know, so you can use influence operations for good. You know, you can bring people together. You can normalize the reality of togetherness, of unity, unifying the country after a tragedy. It's plug and play into a template, you know, and, you know.
So one thing I think would be helpful for the folks both listening and watching is using the hashtag fake news.
Yeah.
Everyone's seen and familiar with the hashtag fake news. And my experience, you know, my studies in psychology, my background as a therapist and such would show me that fake news as a hashtag shuts off the rational part of the mind. So if it fits in with your narrative that, oh, whoever is saying this and someone else is calling that fake news, I don't have to listen. I don't have to pay attention. I don't have to think about what's being said. It's fake, I can dismiss it. And it's the same on the other side or the other sides of.
Yeah, and everything is being weaponized. You know, the tragic event in Florida, it was a matter of minutes until bots took over the Twitter conversations. The viral tweets that were going viral, if you looked, some of them were so polarizing. They're the ones that the bots for nation states and special interest group that have malicious intent are taking and creating this illusion of viral. You know what I mean? So, same with Facebook. Artificial intelligence and machine learning injected into bot technology for comments on Facebook, on YouTube. It's an illusion, you know? And it's funny because you can watch the grammar and syntax and you can almost tell which nation states were working on it. And it's an illusion factory. It's this, you know, we are the tragic inheritors of a mass hallucination that started with Eddie Bernays and propaganda and this stuff. And it's rooted in cultural and consumer fetishism and trying to get people to just to buy things, which you need to drive the economy. But psychological manipulation started to happen, and this led to a battle for the narrative, and things have become politically siloed and extreme.
You know, one thing I think is interesting, because I'll talk to folks about your work and now our work, and they'll say, oh, I can't be influenced, I'm a clear thinker, I'm a rational thinker. And I'll say, well, tell me about the things that you purchase and why you purchase them. If you spend actually a little bit of time talking to them, and they're really honest with you, they will affirm that the billions of dollars that marketing companies spend is money well spent, because they convince you and me and you that we need to aspire to be something different than we are. If we had this particular good or we did this particular service, we'd be cooler or happier or funner or, you know, sexier or whatever it is. So my only point would be is that if this is true in selling you goods and services in the marketplace, and I'm a free market guy and people should be able to buy whatever they want to buy, then the same technology which Eddie Bernays created for selling stuff is also being used to sell us ideas, and in this case to hyper-particize us into these silos that you're talking about. But there's an antidote. You know, we're not just stuck having to buy stuff we don't need because we feel bad about ourselves and want to be something different. We don't have to be stuck in these silos, political silos, that the other side's evil. There's antidotes, and the antidotes you actually talk about in your book, and a few of them are basically understanding how this works. You talk about spiral dynamics, socionics, cognitive biases.
Yeah.
Talk about that first.
Yeah, and to your note, it's interesting if you really look at why do you buy something? You buy something you can't afford that you don't even want to impress somebody you don't like. That's really what it is, right? I mean, just do it, wear Nike. Why do I want to? Well, you know. But it's interesting, the targeting process, and those of you who have meaningful initiatives, this can be a good thing. You know, I'd love to see more positive legislation. That's why I'm on the Hill so much. Just I'll get in and Cyber Shield Act with Senator Markey. Check it out. Call your congressman, senator. Tell them to support it. Stuff like that that's nonpartisan. These techniques I would love to see used with this meaningful stuff. You know, the way it works, nation state style, is the objective is to manipulate, like I said, the cognitive biases. So you need to hyper focus on your target audience. So you start with something like spiral dynamics, which will give you the social evolutionary state of your target audience. What makes them tick? What's important to them? Social, culturally, where are they? The next thing is you need to know the psychoarchetype. What is their psychological structure? You can use socionics for this, and it breaks down the reality of the natural psychological state of this target audience. Socionics also allows for you to come up with their natural alliance pairs. So people they don't know, or that this particular ideological variant wouldn't normally associate with, you can unify them with hashtags, bring them together with hashtags that they're both using. Socionics also, for chaos operations, will give the direct adversaries to each of these particular psychoarchetype silos. So if it's a chaos op, you construct a full operation to bring the attention, normalize an idea with your target audience. Then when they start to organically mutate your memes and use the information, you bring in the adversary. So you do the exact same thing, but with the opposite ideological variant, and there you go. But you do that with the adversaries. Then what you do for the first guys is the best way to embed an idea into their narrative, into their ideological variant silo culture, is you make them fight for that idea. So you bring the two sides together, and that's a chaos op. And then you just fan the flame of chaos, bring in bot technology, and there you go.
Well, thank you very much, James. And why don't we take the opportunity to thank James for this conversation. We have books for everyone. Encourage everyone to come down here and grab one and read it. And I think James will sign if you're so inclined.
And take what is here and give it out. Give it to somebody. You know, take as many as you want, as long as everybody at least gets one.
Are we paying or?
You're taking it for free. Information, if it's worth reading, should be liberated. That's the most natural state of information. So it's free. Take them all.